Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our program on using newspapers in genealogy research. This is the last of our Genealogy Academy programs. We've already covered Ancestry, Family Search, and free genealogy websites. If you've been along for all of these, I hope you found them helpful. And if you haven't, they have all been recorded and are available on the library's YouTube channel. So just hop on over to YouTube and search Cook Memorial Library and you'll see what you've missed. Tonight, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about using newspapers in our genealogy research. I love researching in newspapers. Well, maybe I should rephrase that. I love finding things in newspapers, but the research itself can sometimes be tedious. So before I get you all turned off of researching in newspapers, I better get going on the topic tonight. It might be a new topic for you, and if so, that's fine, because we're going to start from the very beginning. First, we're going to talk about why we would want to use newspapers in genealogy research. Then we'll look at where and how to find the newspapers. Some newspapers have been digitized, and these are available through library subscriptions and personal subscriptions. And then there are some free sites too. And at the end, we'll talk about newspapers on microfilm. We're not really talking about newspapers in their actual paper form, although some libraries might keep those. As a matter of fact, we have some newspapers in newspaper form. But that's such a small percentage of what we would be looking for in genealogy that I'm really not going to go there. This is sort of a presentation on how to use the sites, and more of also in the free sites, we're going to talk about what some of the best sites are. I'm going to try and give a few tips on newspaper research and show you how to use the sites as best I can, but there's a lot to cover tonight. So let's get started. So yeah, the question is, why in the world would you want to use newspapers for research? First of all, they're kind of a way to time travel back to our ancestors' time and place. As this quote says, newspapers live only in the present tense. So as a consequence, they give the time traveler, which we are as genealogists, an unparalleled sense of what the world was like at a particular time. The prejudices, the habits, manners, and preoccupations seen through a fixed prism. In other words, you get the good and the bad. You get what's happening with no sugarcoating. But try to remember as you read the papers with your 21st century eyes and perspectives, especially if you're reading early 1900s, maybe even later than that. The people and the culture really were different back then. And so try not to judge with your current perspective. Second, you can find all kinds of genealogy information on in newspapers. And this is kind of just a partial list here. Although it says vital records, you can't really find the actual vital records, but you can find the clues to those vital records. Newspapers often had birth announcements in them. You could find engagement announcements, reports on marriages, weddings, and as well as obituaries and records of people's deaths. There'll be news articles featuring an ancestor, possibly, maybe even with a photograph, which is always fun. A lot of the old time newspapers from the early 1900s had social columns, and even farther, even more recent than that, but just telling who's visiting whom, who's having a birthday party, who traveled someplace else. It's kind of fun to get that little slice of life of what your ancestors were doing. You might want to look up your ancestor's employer or and find business articles about what that company did or what was going on with them. In the New York papers and some of the other harbor towns, There would be information about ships' arrivals and departures. You would find things like school events and graduations. Sometimes all graduates might be listed or even a picture of them. Classified ads, real estate purchases. I've seen historical columns reprinting an old article or going back and saying what was happening 25 years ago that might include information on your ancestor. And excuse me, things like anniversaries as well can often have some good information. So don't just think about those, important things, but think about trying to find your ancestor and what their life was like. So obviously there are pitfalls as well of newspaper research. Nothing is always full of unicorns and rainbows. Newspapers may not have survived. And to state the obvious, you can't search in something that no longer exists. So maybe it's possible that your paper that your ancestor was in, or the paper from the town where your ancestor lived, no copies survived. Only a fraction of newspapers are online. A lot of them are in microfilm, but to be able to find them online is a little bit harder, which of course we'll address tonight. Following after that, not all online newspapers are free. So even if you have, you might have to be willing to shell out a little bit of money to get them. And then there's this thing called optical character recognition, which is when a computer reads microfilm or newspaper, usually the microfilm, and that's what they use to digitize it, to digitize the newspaper. It's getting better, but it's not a perfect art yet. And then, of course, there are no guarantees that your ancestor was in the paper. Some people just kept their heads down and lived their lives and didn't do anything or didn't want to be noticed. So those are some things that might prevent you from finding your ancestors in the newspapers. But to get you back excited about newspapers again, I'm going to show you a few examples of some of the things that I found in my research that might show you just the kind of fun things you can find in the paper. First is this post-nuptial party for Mrs. Schoenfield. This is my husband's grandmother. And I love how this goes through and talks about, it's a post-nuptial party, right? The party was given at the home of parents. I love this. It tells the bride's maiden name and gives an address. It tells you who her sister was, tells you what they did. They played bridge and who won the prizes. Miscellaneous gifts were given out. You can see that this newspaper comes from October of 1934. This says Mr. and Mrs. Schoenfield were married in Woonsocket on June 18th. So that's quite a bit before October. And they kept their marriage a secret until just recently. The truth is, friends, they eloped. So I think it's funny that this is kind of a backdoor way of letting everyone know that they got married. So sometimes it's kind of fun to know the story behind the story too. And just be aware, if you don't know that story, sometimes there's more than what's being reported in the newspaper. Here's a little quick one. Sarah Margaret, born, this is under births in the paper, born to Mr. and Mrs. B.G. Falk, 3420 Clinton Avenue, February 27th. My mom was mentioned in the newspaper when she was born. Kind of fun to see her name there. And then my great-grandfather, Eric Gustav Falk, this is his obituary. It tells where he lived when he died. This was a real gem because it actually gave me the name of the town in Sweden that he lived in. This Dalarna is misspelled. It should be Dalarna. But Smedjebacken, who knew of a place like that in Sweden? So that was great. It also tells me when he came to Aurora. He was a member of the Lutheran Church, and it tells me where he worked. His wife's name gives his two daughters' names and his son, the grandchildren, of which my mother was one, a sister and a brother who still live in Sweden. It also tells where he would be buried. So obituaries are one of my favorite things to find because they have such potential of giving you all kinds of information as well as clues to the person. And then this one I threw in for fun is about my grandfather who worked for an insurance company, never graduated from high school, let alone college, and yet he went on to be a successful life insurance salesman. And I was kind of thrilled when I found this article that was proof of how hard he worked to sell insurance and how much he enjoyed what he did. Okay, so here's what I have to say about newspapers. This is my own little thing here, that finding newspaper articles is like digging for gold. There's a lot of grunt work to do. It takes a while to sometimes slog through those newspapers, and there really is no guarantee that you'll find anything. You might find a tiny little nugget, you might find just a little dust, or if you're lucky, you'll strike it rich. And I hope that all of you strike it rich, at least in some of your research in newspapers in the future. Our genealogy page on the library's website has just about every thing that we'll talk about tonight. Not everything. Some of the things are not on here, but they should all be in your handouts. So when I go to the sites that we have, the library sites that we have, I'm going to be going from off of our library's webpage. When you go to cooklib.org, click on research and then click on genealogy. And there's a drop-down menu called newspapers. And like I said, all the subscription databases that we're going to talk about tonight are here. And one more thing before we get started. I want you to remember that you're doing research here and you need to evaluate, especially the free websites. You need to evaluate them for what they're giving you. Kind of go back to the last academy that we had on free genealogy websites and use some of those tips that we talked about, especially when we went through Cindy's list in such detail. Things to look for, to be aware of. Try to find out what the source is, be aware of the source, check the coverage of a newspaper database and see what areas of it, what time period does it cover. Here's another thing that may seem obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway. If you're looking through a newspaper database that has a coverage of your newspaper, say up until 1910, and the person that you're looking for wasn't born until 1914, you're not going to find that person in the newspaper because they weren't alive yet. So coverage makes a difference. Also, be aware of the search features, how you can search, how you can narrow and refine your search, and how to save what you find. We always want to be able to save what we find, and some of you may know what I'm going to say next. Cite your source. I really want to take a minute to discuss this because it's so important to keep track of your sources. Remember this from Genealogy 101. Especially with newspapers, it's easy to print something out or clip something or download it and not get the citation of what newspaper it came out of. So I'm showing you a way that I use to save newspapers. I'm not saying it's the best, but this will give you an idea. This is a file folder in one of my genealogy files. And I usually, under the person's name, have a folder called newspapers. And so every newspaper article I find about them, I put in that folder. And I give each article a name, starting with the 4-digit year, then an underscore, then the 2-digit month, and the 2-digit date. So that kind of puts everything in a chronological order. And then what I'll usually do is either spell out or abbreviate the name of the newspaper and include the page. And then I'll give it some title or description that means something to me, so that I'm trying to remember when was that article that my grandma visited Chicago. Here it is right here, Edna Visits Chicago. So whether you save something in an online form, whether you print something out and put it down on paper, please, please, please make sure to put your citation, because you probably will, or maybe someone else will, want to go back and revisit that article. Come up with your own system, include the citation so that you or someone else can go back and find it again. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox now, and we will go on to see what we can learn about subscription databases for newspapers. These are only going to be the ones that we subscribe to at Cook Memorial Library. That's why we're going off of the library's website. This is a library program after all. These databases are larger collections. Usually they're well indexed and they're put out by big companies. So there's a lot of vetting and good processing behind them all. The first one I'm going to talk about is not one that many people know or use, and I think it deserves a little more love than it gets. It's called the Chicago Tribune Archive. So this is kind of what it looks like. I'm going to go into our library's webpage here, like I said I would. Here's the genealogy page, and here's the newspaper drop-down menu, and here is the Chicago Tribune Historical Archive. To learn more about this, the website does have a little about the archive, so you could read this and find out what it's all about. But I will tell you that it has obituaries and death notices from 1860 to 1984. Notice that time period, 1860, that's before the fire. So if you have early Chicago ancestors, this would be a good place to look. It also has a clippings file from the 1920s to 1984. I think in journalism jargon, that's called a morgue, where they kept and filed articles about different topics. And then you can also find the front page from the Tribune. So if you're trying to get a handle on what happened on a particular date, we'll look and see how you can find that. First, let's take a look at these death notices. It's right over here in the left-hand corner. I'm going to put in the name of a person, Donald Bassett, who died in 1959. That's all I'm going to put in, and click go. And I'm sorry, my computer seems a little slow tonight. Usually things pop right up. Anyway, we get 3 results here. 2 for May 18th and 1 for May 17th. You'll notice that one of them has an OB on it and one of them has a DN. The OB stands for obituary and the DN stands for death notice. Now, since those are 2 different things, we're going to look at each one of them, kind of do a little comparison here. This is the obituary, which is written out in text form. Services for Donald Bassett, formerly of Chicago, died in Miami on this date. Services are going to be held at the chapel. This tells that he was a tennis and football star at Inglewood High School, and he taught for 35 years at Marshall High School and for 3 years in Harrison High School. He retired in 53. He leaves his widow, Emily, named, a daughter, Marjorie Ann, her name, and a sister. No name for the sister. So that was the obituary that someone paid to put in. Let's go back and look at the death notice. I think it's kind of interesting that they are different. in the death notice, which doesn't read like an article. It just says that he died at Miami on this date. He was the beloved husband of Emily. It gives his wife's maiden name, which is awesome. There's Marjorie Ann again, brother of Helen Reed, the late Mary Malloy, and William S. Bassett. So one of these is the sister that was not named, and there was another sister that wasn't even named in the obituary, and the brother wasn't named. So we're getting a little bit more information here. Again, it tells the name of the, or not the name, but it tells that the chapel is holding the ceremony, and it also says that he's going to be buried at Evergreen Cemetery, that he was a retired teacher and member of the Board of Trade Post of the American Legion. So you can see how putting those two things together gives you a fuller picture. So I guess the thing to remember from that is look at everything. Just because I said that, I'm going to click on the one that says May 17th, but this is pretty much the same thing. Okay. So let's go back. I'll use my back arrow here. No, we're going to do edit search. If you click on home, that goes into a completely different, goes into a bigger database. We want to just edit the search here. And I'm going to show you that you can also look for articles in here. These are the ones that like might have been at the morgue. I'm going to just type in the word blizzard because it's been so hot lately. It'd be nice to, not nice to have a blizzard, but anyway. Okay, so we've got a few things here. I think, did I spell that right? Excuse me. I'm going to edit that search. No, I didn't spell it right. We need another Z in there. So you'll notice that it does have, it's listing 10 at a time. And over here down at the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that there are a lot more results than that. But the thing I want to point out is that when you click on the name of this, see how this is different than that obituary and death notice icon that we had before. So when I click on this, what that means is that this is going to be a PDF. And as such, it has all the features of Adobe that you can make it bigger if you want to see it. It's just a little window here, but you can do that. And there's a print function right here, as well as a download function. So those are two ways that you can save whatever article. I'm going to go back to edit, and I forgot to tell you that on the obituary and death notice search that we did, they were not in the PDF format. So unfortunately, there's not an easy way to print them. Let me just bring up one of those again, and I'll show you what I would do to print them out. And I must have typed something wrong because we know that, yeah, he did not die in 1959. Sorry about that little mistyping there. Okay, so if we wanted to print this out, there's no search feature at all here. You can email it to yourself, and that would be nice. Otherwise, what you have to do is use the print feature in your browser. Mine is these three little dots right here. I'm in Chrome right now, and this would let me print. So you just have to be familiar with your browser to know how to do that. One last little gem that you can find here in the Chicago Tribune archive is front pages. So I'm just going to type in a date here that has lived in infamy. Only I'm typing in the date after. Okay, so I typed in June 7th, and here's something about the houseboats. None of these look like they might be a front page, but when you click on this, it does show you the front page. This is the day after troops landed in Normandy, and so you can see what it was like. And again, you can print this out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It wouldn't be that big, but you might not be able to read all the articles, but it's kind of neat to see the big headlines and what was going on. So give that a try. And I forgot to mention, as we first got started, since all these are on the library's website, if you have a library card from Cook Memorial Library, you can go to this site from home and access any of these databases with your library card. If you have a library card from another library, check to see if your library subscribes to those databases as well. Or you can come into the library and use them. It doesn't matter whether or not you have a library card. Okay, so that was the Chicago Tribune Archive. The next database that we're going to talk about is the Chicago Tribune Historical Database. Similar names, but not the same database at all. This one, and again, here we go to the newspapers drop-down menu, Chicago Tribune Historical Database. This is put up by a company called ProQuest, which is provides a lot of content to libraries. And you'll look right here, the coverage says this is from 1849 to 1998. We do have another service of the Tribune that brings it up currently, but this is the best example, I think, for our genealogical purposes. There's a basic search and an advanced search. I'll give you an example of how to do both of those. You can search just by putting in a couple of names. I have a family with kind of unusual name, Bajorsa. So I type in the name there and hit search. And this first article that comes up is the one I was looking for, that has a nice picture and description of Debbie Klein, a picture of Debbie Klein, and says that she's going to be married to Raymond Bajorsa II. I just love finding pictures in newspapers. I think that's the coolest thing. So here we are. You can tell this is a PDF. So if you wanted to print it out, you could click here. If you wanted to download it, you could do that. And over here, it even offers you an option to email. But I'd stick with one of those two methods. Sometimes email can be not exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so that was the simple search, the basic search. But the other way that you can search is by the advanced search. And my example from this comes from another newspaper article that I found in a local paper that said my grandparents had gone to a Cubs game on August 29th, 1930. Actually, that's not what the paper said. The paper was dated August 29th, 1930. And it said, my grandparents went to a Cubs game that they attended on Sunday. So I had to look at a 1930 calendar and found out that the Sunday before the 29th was August 24th. But if I wanted to know what happened at that baseball game, I would have to look at the 25th newspaper. So there's a way here to select a particular date. You can also use an after or before, or use a date range if you want to find something that, say, you're looking for something that took place and you're not sure, but you think it was in the month of August, or you think it was in the year 25. You can say January 1, 1925 to December 31st, 1935, and that will get the whole date. I'm going to use the particular date, and the date we're going to search for is August 25th, 1930. And I'm just going to put Cubs in the search because I went to see the Cubs. Hopefully that will bring it up. And it does. Cubs win 3-2. Taylor steals home in ninth. 45,000 go wild as daring play defeats Giants. Well, that just sounds really exciting. My grandparents were two of those 45,000, and can you tell I'm sort of a Cubs fan too. Anyway, here's the whole article, so I can read about the game that they went to. And then you'll notice that this is sort of cut out the headline and the article and doesn't have anything else from that page. Over here on the left, you can do a page view as a PDF, and this will show us what the entire page looks like. So that's kind of fun that you can see. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun to read cartoons from other times and what else was on the sports page that day, and anything else that might have pertained to the game. So again, not one of those big birth, marriage, and death things that you might be looking for, but a slice of life, and tells you what it was like to be in my grandparents' shoes on that particular day in that particular place. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is the New York Times historical database. Does that look familiar? It should, because it's also put out by ProQuest. So it has a lot of the same search features. So we go to the website, use the newspaper drop-down menu, and go to New York Times historical database. Funnily enough, it keeps the search that I did before, but we're going to try a different one this time. One of the things that I think is fun to do, especially in the New York paper, when I mentioned this before, was look up what was happening when your ancestor's ship arrived in America. My great-grandfather, Eric Falk, the one whose obituary we saw, arrived in New York on April 20th, 1890 on a ship called the City of Berlin. So I'm going to do an advanced search here and put in the name of the ship, City of Berlin. And I'm going to do that particular on this date again. And that was April. Remember, with newspapers, if you're looking for something that reporting on something that happened on a particular date, you might want to go to the next day. So I'm going to look up April 21st, 1890. And this first article here is an article about barge office affairs. Now, I did a little research on Ellis Island, and you may or may not know that Ellis Island didn't open until 1892. Previously, they had used a place called Castle Garden to kind of process and welcome all the new immigrants. But Castle Garden closed down a couple days before this. And so my great-grandfather just happened to come in when there wasn't a Castle Garden and there wasn't a Ellis Island yet. They were using this thing called the barge office, and it had just opened. So apparently there was an anticipated rush there, but that didn't happen. This does tell me that the boat that he was on brought 856 immigrants, which sounds like a lot of people. They passed quickly through the registry department, so there weren't any problems there. There was one person who was detained who looks to be quite old, but he had a place to go, so that's good. Here's another cute little story that talks about a woman from Ireland who had created a sensation by going into hysterics, and General O'Baron, who went to her assistance and soothed her by speaking of her native place. I'm sure once she heard that Irish brogue, she just felt so much better. Anyway, all this was seen going on when my great-grandfather got off the boat and was being processed to be a new immigrant in America. And again, that little slice of life that kind of brings my ancestor to life. That's what newspaper research does, and that's the fun stuff, those little gold nuggets that we find. These are the kind of articles that keep me coming back to newspaper research. Okay, whoops, I'm sorry. Our next database that we're going to talk about is newspapers.com. This is kind of new to the library, so I can't say that I feel 100% comfortable with this, but I've used it quite a bit, so I'm good with it. Again, go to the library's newspapers site, and here's newspapers.com. One of the things that I liked about this, as I was looking at it, it has a couple of introductory videos over here, which I would encourage you to watch because they're only like 5 minutes long. But when learning a new database, at least for me, it always helps to see examples and see how people use things. So I would recommend watching those videos. Also, you may notice that up here on the top, it has my name. Even though this is a library database, you can create a free account here that you can use to save some things. One of the ways that you can save articles is by doing clippings. And this saves all the clippings that I've done. So if I wanted to go back and have a look at it, oh, this says, oops, something went wrong. Yeah, because these are not my clippings. These belong to somebody else. But that's okay. That gives you an idea that clippings can be saved. Okay. So one of the ways you can search this database is by papers. If you know the name of a paper, or if you're looking for, the name of a paper, you can put it in here. For instance, like the Daily Plainsman, I might have remembered seeing that. There's only one in here. And I like this because it tells you Huron is from Huron, South Dakota. It tells you a date range. So this is really pretty extensive coverage here from 1886 to 1973. I found my husband's aunt's marriage picture in here. I'm always looking for papers from my hometown, which is Muncie, Indiana, but that is not in there. So there was another example I had here of a town called Litchfield, and that's Litchfield, Nebraska. They had several different papers here covering different time periods. The Litchfield Monitor looks like it's the longest, but there were a couple of others. So it's kind of good to know about those too. However, that is not the way I would recommend searching this database at home. I would do it by find by location. So I think it assumes that we're going to be in the United States. So you can choose your state. I'll choose Illinois. My grandfather, the insurance salesman, lived in Princeton. So I might want to do a search on him. Now there's only one newspaper here, but the coverage is pretty extensive, going all the way to 1950. And the way that I would search his name then would be to put his name in quotes. And I put his middle initial because sometimes that was included in the paper. And there were unfortunately other Harry Petersons in Princeton. So give that a click. And this first article here, when I click on it, it has his name. Looks like it starts at the top of the page and in the middle of an article, but this is about his marriage to my grandma. You'll notice this is 1932, so this is after the big Cubs game. Kind of an extensive article, which I love looking for wedding articles because they can kind of tell you a lot of things too. So here's the beginning of it. A pretty wedding was solemnized Wednesday afternoon. And yeah, it just goes on and up like that. Maybe I'll use this as an example of how to save articles in this database. Over here in the top right, you can print or save. When you click on that, you can print the entire page, or you can select a portion of the page, and it gives you this little box with the handles. If I were doing this for real, I have already done this, but then you could print or save it. And if I were doing, like I said, if I were doing it for real, I'd make sure to get that beginning of the article on the bottom page. And then that would just print and save it out. To be honest, I can't remember if when it prints or saves, if it includes the article title, I mean the newspaper name and date. So if you print it out and it's not there, make sure you write that down. If you save it in a good place. Now, another thing that you can do is clip, and it looks the same. It has this little box that you can drag, but when you clip it, here it has that, and I thought there was a way to download it, didn't you know? But that should end up in my clippings section. Here it is. So there's no oops. Now you can see all the articles that I've clipped. So it's kind of nice that even though you don't have a subscription to this, you can kind of make a little collection of your own newspapers. Let's go back to the beginning, and I wanted to just do one more search using this search box here in the beginning, which I sort of skipped right over. I'm going to search for that Raymond Bajorsa. And you'll notice when I do that here, it asks if I want to put quotes around it, and that means it will search those two words together as a phrase. So I won't get an article with Raymond in one section and Bajorsa in the other. If you have a more common name, it's good to do that with the quotations. You can put a date or a date range in here, and you can add a location if you want. I'm just going to search like this. And you'll see that it comes up with a couple of things here. It gives me a little snippet of what it looks like. And then when I click on the link here, it will show the whole paper and show me what where the article is. This was some sort of church thing with Mrs. Raymond Bajorsa and Mrs. Harold Fraser. And I happen to know these are sisters. This is not Debbie Klein, who married Raymond Bajorsa. This is her mother-in-law. Not that you're keeping a family tree on my family, but anyway, just to see how those all things fit together. So that is newspapers.com. I hope you get a chance to work with that, because it has a good collection of papers from across the country. As it says, well, 181 million pages of newspapers. I can't remember how many papers it actually has, but a really good collection. And remember, not everything. So that's kind of why I like to do the find by location and see what papers it has. I think I was going to go maybe do another, let's do another bigger city and just show you some, if there's more than one newspaper in a town, you can look and see what those coverages are too. I didn't want to do that. But if you just click on the newspaper, then it will tell you what the coverage is. In this case, there's only one day of that particular newspaper, but Indianapolis Leader, maybe that will have more. So you know right away what years you're searching and whether or not your ancestor might be in that time period or not. Okay, I just wanted to point out one of the ones that we didn't talk about here is called the Daily Herald, which is kind of our local paper in the suburban area. It covers from 95 to 2020 to 2022. So it's more of a current paper. And this is from Newsbank, and it includes a lot of other papers besides our local one. So if you're looking for something more recent, this might be a good newspaper database for you. But as far as genealogy goes, it doesn't have a lot of the old articles from our ancestors. Okay. So that pretty much covers all the newspaper databases that the library subscribes to. But of course, there's much, much more to find in newspapers besides just the library databases. There's also personal subscriptions. If you yourself felt like putting out a little bit of money and having a database at your fingertips, it's not available to us through the library. Ancestry.com does have some newspapers as a part of it. Genealogy Bank is something that I would compare to newspapers.com. And there should be no space there. I typed that wrong. Sorry. It's genealogybankaltogether.com and newspapers.com. And those are just a couple of the big ones that I thought of. I think the database Find My Past also has a lot of English newspapers as well. A lot of times you can have a free trial with these to kind of try it out and at least get a feel for whether or not the database has any of the newspapers that might have your ancestors in it. So you could try the free trial if you wanted. Maybe you know a friend who subscribes and they might let you try a couple searches out for them, or you could find a library that subscribes to one of those papers and give that a try as well. But since those require personal subscriptions and the library doesn't have Genealogy Bank, we're just going to go on. We're just going to go on to the free websites. We're kind of getting into Wild West territory here, I would say, with digitized newspapers on library websites or free websites. There's not a lot of rules, and you got to have your wits about you. Nevertheless, these can still be very useful and fruitful. So just kind of go into this with a little bit of a sense of adventure. Not all of the links that I'm going to talk about tonight are on our genealogy webpage, but they should all be in your handout. So we'll go through them in alphabetical order. The first one is called Ancestor Hunt. Ancestor Hunt newspaper links, actually. Ancestor Hunt is a webpage that has a lot more than newspapers, but I'm just going to talk about the newspaper section of it. Right off the bat, I want to, this is something that we talked about in the free genealogy web pages. I want to apologize. I hope that there are no offensive ads that show up. I can't see everything on my screen, so I might miss something, but because it's a free website, they obviously accept ads to make a little bit of money. So I hope nothing bad pops up. So we're going to start here at the top. Newspaper links, this public record search, that's an ad, skip right over it. Same thing here, it's an ad, skip over it. Here's a little something that is just decoration of an old newspaper to help, and this is something from Ancestor Hunt, and then we've got more ads. And then it tells a little bit more here about what they do 39,000 links to free newspapers. And I would want to point out that there are tips and articles about newspaper research best practices. I haven't looked at this, so go on over and take a look at it and see if they give you conflicting advice from what I'm saying, or maybe we're all on the same page as far as using newspapers. But so I think this would be a good place to take a look at. Okay, more ads, skip right over that. Then what this is doing is giving us links of free newspapers by state. So it's kind of like a portal, kind of like Cindy's list for newspapers. So it just gives you some states and more ads. I'm going to click here on Illinois Online Historical Newspapers, and we'll see what they've got. More ads, free historical newspaper links for Illinois. And what they do, you know, sometimes with these ads, you can click and make them go away. So first they talk about statewide collections. Library sites have statewide collections. And these are the newspapers from Chronicling America that are all from Illinois. Then there's Google News Archive and newspapers on there. And we're going to talk about those two places later. But that's what a portal does, is show you other places to go. Then there are digital newspaper collections, alphabetically listing newspapers. So each one of these is a link. I think there was one that I was gonna, actually we could just try one, Urbana Daily Courier. If we click on that, it takes us to the Illinois Digital Newspaper Collection, where you can search the collection or click on one of these dates and just browse through. So that's what this library, that's what this site does, is take you to those kinds of things. It also has this farm, field, and fireside collection. So, you know, something about farming, like our newspapers about farming, Civil War newspapers from Illinois, county and library collections. And I'm going to zip down through all these counties too. Lots of counties. Look at this. This is us, and this is really annoying because it's calling us Cook County Memorial Public Library, which we are not. But anyway, if you clicked on this, it would take you to our library's website. So it's kind of a good way if you can wade through all the other ads and everything that are on here. It'll find newspaper links from other places. So yeah, I'm going to close this out because there's way too many ads popping up. And you can tell there's a lot to explore there. So, you know, we could probably just stop, but I've got more to show you. So we're going on here. The next free website I want to tell you about is called Chronicling America. And this is put out by the Library of Congress. It's got a lot going on it, really busy site. So I'm just going to talk about the digitized newspaper section right here. And then over here is the newspaper directory, which we'll get to in a little bit. It tends to have older papers, like papers that would be out of copyright or usually before the 1920s. What does it say? 19 million pages available. So it's pretty good. We've got a lot there. You can search this one of two ways. first I'm going to use this search page here on the left, and it's going to search all states from these ranges, which you could limit if you wanted to, limit it by date as well. I'm going to put in 2 names. And click go. And here's another fun wedding paper that comes up. And this one is actually from, what does it say? 1963. Yeah. And that's 1963, all right, isn't it? But again, a good, cool picture and a nice little bit about the bride and the groom, where the reception is, and short wedding trip and where they're going to be living. So that's kind of fun. The other thing you can do on the library on this website is to see what digitized newspapers they have available. So in this case, I am going to choose a particular state, nothing else. But when I say go, then there's a list of all the newspapers in Illinois that are digitized on the Chronicling America site. I wanted to stop down here at Rock Island and show you what this looks like, because there are several newspapers from Rock Island. This one is from 20 to 23. This is 1877 to 1885. Here's the Rock Island Argus from 1893 to 1920. So that's a nice, good bit. And then here's the Daily Argus from just a couple of years, and another one here too. So what is this column? I can't remember what that says. Why are we answering yes to that? It has more information about it. But I was going to show you, if you're looking for something, a particular something, maybe you know what you're looking for. Let me show you this Rock Island Argus, how you can kind of drill down into a particular page. We can browse. This tells you about the Argus, kind of a little bit of like a history of the newspaper, which the Library of Congress, you would expect they would have something like that. Here's where you can browse issues, sort of in the middle here. When I click on that, it gives me a calendar with a list of dates and then links for each date. So I kind of picked a date at random, just 1906. Let's look at March 8th. Have a look at page 7. And if you can use these buttons here to go in. This is one of those social columns that I was telling you about. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Lee Sr. of Rock Island came out Thursday to see their grandson and to visit their children. Huh. Fun. This is kind of Mrs. Charles Extraman children visiting with her brother and wife last week, departed Tuesday morning for their new home in Canada, where Mr. Ekstrom went a week ago. You could get a lot of information about your family in one little paragraph like that, and maybe that might answer a question for you, like where did these people go or when did they leave? So yeah, as I show you these examples, I just have to tell you all the fun stuff that you can find in libraries. So that's the Library of Congress, called Chronicling America. The digitized newspapers that they have on that site. The next one that we're going to talk about is called Elefind. And I'm not entirely sure why they call it Elefind, except that it maybe is connecting with how well elephants remember things. Anyway, this is kind of a combination of Ancestor Hunt and Chronicling America. It is not flashy at all, but it does have a little thing about it and search tips, which I'm not going to go into, but I recommend that you take a lot of read through those and the getting started before you get started. I'm just going to show you 2 quick ways to search Elefind. Here's the search box here, and then we'll browse through some newspaper articles. I'm going to use that Bajorceth name that's so unusual to me. It still comes up with a lot, not too many though, 128. The first one is from the Illinois Digital Newspaper, and the second one is from Australia. So they're all over the place here. This also shows you here on the left how you can narrow your search to a particular decade or even a particular publication title or source. Here's the Chronicling of America again, but then they've got someplace in Australia and then a Washington digital newspapers too. So see, there's all these kind of digital newspapers projects out there, and sometimes it's hard to know where they are or how to find them. So places like Elefind can be good at, an Ancestor hunt can be good at getting you to those places. The thing that Elefind does that Ancestor hunt doesn't is have this search box here. But just like Ancestor hunt, you can browse the newspaper articles. It's kind of nice that there are no ads popping up in our face over here. And this is a humongo list. Close your eyes or look away if you get dizzy by something like this. But yeah, it just goes on forever. So how would you ever find what you're looking for in this list? How could I tell if they have any monthly papers in here? Well, my browser has a find feature when I click on those 3 buttons here and go to the find, or Control F will also bring up this feature on most any computer. So if I type in Muncie here, it takes me straight to the 2 papers that they have linked to. I can click on that and it'll take me to, it'll tell me a little bit about it, how many issues they have available. But if I want to actually search that, then I can go to this Indiana Digital Historical project. And it doesn't look like it's taking me to the Muncie paper. I'd probably have to go to Delaware County and find that, was it the Muncie Times? I can't remember. But here again, this is similar to what we've seen before. Oh, it's fairly new too. Anyway, maybe it was the other one that was older. Now I'm going to have to look here at the Post-Democrat. There we go, 21 to 50. Those are some good ranges. And anyone that's a link probably has the newspapers on it. And here you go, being able to look through a newspaper. Isn't that cool? It's the paper. You can tell it was folded up into quarters and I don't know. Anyway, so that's how you can use the search feature, not the search feature, but a find feature to browse the newspapers and find a town that you might be looking for. Okay. We've got a couple more, and this next one is, some people love it and some people hate it. I think it just depends on what you find there and if you're willing to give it a shot. It's called Fulton Search. Now, if you look in your handout, I don't have a link to this because even though there obviously is a web page, typing in the web page for someone, putting a link in there didn't work for me. So what I suggest is using Google and searching Fulton Search or Fulton History. I'm going to do Fulton History first, just to show you what this website used to look like and how long it has been around. This is old, people. Do you remember when the internet looked like this? And everybody was like all excited about being able to put whatever these are. I can't even remember what they are. But this old Fulton, New York postcard history website is done by one person, this guy, Thomas Ternisky, who has a digitizing studio set up in a shed in his backyard and is just like digitizing all the microfilm he can get a hold of. Tends to be out in New York, but I do believe the Antioch paper is here too. And if you wanted to look and see, you know, kind of do a browse and see what papers are available, I could help you with that more later. It's kind of a convoluted search, but I just get such a kick out of, sorry, just get such a kick out of this because it's one passionate person out there doing this and having a little bit of fun with it as well. But let's go to Fulton search. I'm going to Google that, bring up Fulton search, and this is the search page where again you can put in search terms. Sorry, I'm reading this, and obviously this guy is some kind of computer geek. Does have a few ways of limiting things, but I'm just going to put in a couple of names here just to show you what it looks like when you do get something. I know somebody who loves this because they have indexed a paper from her ancestor's hometown and she's found tons of stuff there. This also shows you a little bit about the horrors of optical character recognition, because you can tell that some of this just isn't translating at all. But if you use this site and find something like this, I just wanted to show you that the best way to get to the article itself is to use this button that says highlighted. That will take you to the page that's in, and I don't know why he's using all these funky colors, and I'm not sure if you can get rid of them, but it comes up in an Adobe format, so you could print or download. You could print or download that. And here are two others. So a couple of papers or a couple of articles. Oh, look, they're going to Ireland. So that's Fulton search. Not for the faint of heart, but this search feature does make it better. And again, you got to give it a try and see what's there. Okay, our last free, this is our last one. Our last free newspaper site that we're going to talk about is the Google News Archive. And it's kind of funny that it comes last alphabetically because it's probably the least useful. But again, if what you're looking for is there, it's great. So let me show you. This is one of those projects that I think Google started and they thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to digitize all these newspapers. And then I realized what a big chore it was going to be. So they never finished it. But thankfully, they didn't take it down because it does have some helpful digitized newspapers. The downside is that the search feature is kind of clunky. It does have a search feature right here, so you can try that. Or you can search by or browse through the list of newspapers here. I'm just going to go here to the Aurora Daily Star. And again, they have things laid out. Oops. You can tell which dates they have and which ones they don't by which ones are available here. So that's the year. You'll click on the year and it will give you the month. Click on the month and it will give you dates available. Actually, I want to go to March 12th. And kind of interesting to see. I guess you have to use the little arrows here. There are a couple of obituaries even on this front page. And I think that they did a really good job of scanning. I think these are some of the most clear newspaper replications that we've seen all night. So in one way, I'm kind of sorry that they didn't keep it up. But let's go back to this first page here. Maybe I'll put in that name, Bajorsa, and see if anything comes up there. Oh, yes. Can you believe this? I'm sorry, you shouldn't make fun of someone's name, but Lillian Bingenheimer married David Bajorsa. That's more of a mouthful than Sonia Schoenfield. Lillian Bingenheimer Bajorsa. Anyway, great pictures again, and they really did a good job with this. So the search feature might be a little better than it used to be. Again, see if they have your paper, give it a try and see where it comes up. Okay, we're almost done here, but I did want to do a quick talk about microfilm. Obviously, new libraries or other repositories wouldn't be able to keep newspapers. If you get a newspaper still, you know how they pile up and it takes a lot of space to save them. So microfilming was a great way to save them and take up less space at the same time. I should have mentioned this probably at the beginning, but the most digitizing was done from microfilmed newspapers. So that's another pitfall that I didn't mention, that if the microfilm of a paper was bad, then that would obviously have an effect on how well your search would go to. The upside is that if you're actually looking at the microfilm, sometimes a digital image, like we have on our digital microfilm readers here in the library, you can manipulate that image and maybe clean it up a little bit. So how do you find newspapers on microfilm, and would you even be able to use them? There are two ways that we could go with newspaper microfilm. You could go to a library that has the microfilm of the newspaper that you want to read and physically use it there. Or you could try to get it through Interlibrary Loan. I'm going to look at two different websites here. Chronicling America, you'll remember we use this to look at the digitized newspapers from the Library of Congress. They have a newspaper directory, so let's take a look at that. It's a directory of newspapers published in the United States. It can help identify what titles exist for a specific place and time, and it can tell you where they're located. So if I select a state, like Indiana, and my Delaware County, and city of Muncie, and click search, this will show me all the newspapers that were published out of Muncie. And you'll notice that this is not all of them. This is results 1 through 20 of 62. So I can use this to go to the next page. And here I can find the Muncie Evening Press that I remember my parents reading when I was growing up. When I click on that, it tells me about, this is kind of like looking up a newspaper in a catalog, because it will tell you about the newspaper, where it was published, how long it was published, what volumes and numbers there were. And then down at the bottom, it says holdings, which is a library term that means where could I find this microfilm or newspaper. And here are some of the places that have it. And it will tell you if it's on microfilm and what dates they have it. This one doesn't look very long. Who knows why the Brigham Young University has a newspaper from Muncie, Indiana, but and these have some scattered issues and a little unspecified there, but more in Bloomington. So that is one way of looking up how you can find where a microfilm would be. Another way that you can do this is by just sorry, I think that was all I wanted to show you on that. Seems like there was, yeah, the directory of the Muncie Evening Press. So you can select any state. Selecting when the newspaper is published is probably more for academics trying to look for a time period instead. But for our purposes here, we're trying to find where a microfilm would be. Okay, let's look at the last one, which you may remember if you went to the free genealogy website, which is WorldCat. So let's take a quick look at that. This, when I go into it, says that the library, our library, any library, has a customized WorldCat. And do you want to go on that, or do you want to stay on WorldCat? I personally like to stay on this one, but it's up to you which way you want to go. So what I can do, remember, this is kind of like looking up a newspaper in microfilm. I mean, looking up a newspaper in a catalog. And I'm going to put the name of the newspaper. And that search just brings up everything. But over here on the left, as we're learning, you can always narrow and refine things. And this by format lets me say, I just want the newspapers that have Muncie Evening Press in it. And here it is. So when I click on this, it gives me the newspaper, and in a little easier format shows me what libraries have it. And the good thing about this is that there's a place right here where you could request the item. And we do we have in the past successfully gotten microfilm from other libraries. So if you find that this is the only way you can get the newspaper that you need, feel free to try and request it, and our interlibrary loan staff will do their best to get it for you. It would come into the library here, and you would have to use it in the library on our microfilm readers. This service is only available to people who have Cook library cards, but if you don't, check with your home library and see if they do that as well. All right. Another thing that I believe is on your handout, which I don't have in the PowerPoint here, are other places that hold microfilm. And can you believe this? I didn't even print out the handout for myself. So I'm going to have to go by memory here, but there are places that you can go, like the Abraham Lincoln Library in Springfield, or the one I would recommend is the Wisconsin Historical Society up in Madison. They have a huge, the Madison one especially has a huge did I say it's big? It's a huge collection of newspaper microfilms, and you can go there and use the microfilm there and print out, or I don't know if they, I can't remember if they have a digital microfilm reader, but anyway, so if you're looking for a place that's far away, that you wouldn't be able to go to, and we can't get through interlibrary loan, and you feel like taking a trip up to Madison, think about that as a possibility. So my friends, that is the end of our presentation tonight. I am going to stop the recording and hope that everyone who's listening to this as a recording will have gotten good information. Nope, that didn't stop the whole, excuse me, I'm gonna try to figure out how to stop the recording. There we go.